I know people are still joining us, but let's go ahead and get started. Once again, good morning, good almost afternoon, good evening. Thank you all for joining us. We are looking forward to today's discussion. It's a little different than what we usually do, but we're going to be talking about how the pandemic transformed the HR function for private equity firms. And we recently published an article on this where we interviewed a few of today's panelists as well as some others that aren't speaking, but it's an interesting and timely topic. So we're looking forward to diving into that. Before we do, we have a few housekeeping things to get through. For those of you I have not had the opportunity to meet, my name is Lena Dobrir. I'm the Director of Operations at Opus Connect. We are a membership-based organization that caters to lower middle market M&A transactional professionals. So private equity firms, investment bankers, lenders, family office. We do a number of events throughout the year. We're up to, I think, 350 now, many of them virtual. We're getting back to in person here in 2022. So looking forward to seeing a few of you in person, number of different formats. But if you're interested in learning a bit more about us, who we are, how we can support your business development needs, please feel free to reach out to any of my colleagues or specifically Swayze Yancey, whose contact information is below. We'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have. During today's webinar, we'll be taking live Q&A. So as things pop up or come to mind, please submit them in the Q&A bubble you see at the bottom of your screen. I'll ask that you kindly refrain from using the chat function. We won't be monitoring that, but go ahead and submit your questions in the Q&A, and we'll try to get to as many as possible during today's discussion. I do want to give David Kogan an opportunity to introduce himself if he is here, but I don't believe that he is. Sapient Investigations, David Kogan, he's been around since before me, if you can imagine, at Opus Connect. He's been a longtime sponsor and partner. They do corporate intelligence. If you're interested in learning more about Sapient Investigations and how they can help you or any of your portfolio companies, please reach out to David Kogan. And before we do begin, I want to launch one of our poll questions that we'll be asking all of you today. And that is to understand who is in the audience. So let us know. You should see a dialog box pop up on your screen there. We'll give it about 15 seconds. Are you an independent sponsor, investment banker, capital provider on the debt or equity side, service provider or other? Let us know. This will give us a general idea of who we're speaking to today. Okay. Give it about 5 more seconds here. So it looks like the breakdown is 8% independent sponsor, no investment bankers. I find that slightly hard to believe, but perhaps you all stepped away. 8% capital provider on the debt side, 8% capital provider on the equity side, and 75% service provider. I think this is a really relevant event for many of our service providers. So we're happy to have you all join us today. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce today's moderator, Tim Lewis of Southfield Capital. You may have seen him moderate a webinar or an in-person panel or have met him at one of our events over the years. He's quite active. He's a partner at Southfield Capital, and he joined in 2014, but he's been in this industry for over 25 years, doing a number of different things as a private equity investor, most recently, but he's done turnaround and management consultant as well. So he really brings a wide variety of wisdom to the table, and we're looking forward to having him lead today's discussion. So Tim, I'm gonna bow out now and hand you the floor, if you will. And it looks like you're muted, so I apologize. We'll have to get you unmuted. There we go.
I'm unmuted. Thank you, Lena, and thank you to Opus. Appreciate the opportunity to discuss this topic, and thank you to Keith and Lisa for participating. Really appreciate you on fairly last minute notice, pulling all this together over the last 2 weeks. at Southfield have two strategies, and I thought I'd just quickly walk you through that and then introduce the other panelists. We have a mezzanine strategy and we have a private equity strategy. I spend most of my time on the private equity strategy. On the private equity side, we invest in lower middle market, entrepreneur-built business services companies. And within business services, very industry agnostic. We've invested in financial services, IT services, industrial services, logistics. And our strategy is to work in partnership with the owners to help them grow their businesses. And we hope in most instances that we'll double, triple the size of the business during our hold period, if not quadruple it. So we obviously have a nice alignment with what Opus is doing and all the folks that attend the Opus events, and that's why we're a regular participant in their programs. Why don't I introduce the panelists? Really, again, appreciate them participating. Lisa, I'm going to let you introduce yourself. Lisa is the EVP of Human Resources at Milrose Consultants, and why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Tim. And thanks for the invite to today's event. So I'm a seasoned HR professional. I've been in the profession for about 20 plus years. I have exposure in various different industries, currently with Milrose Consultants, and we're in the construction business and professional services arena. And I am happy to be here today to share our experiences with everyone regarding how COVID has transformed our workplace. Thank you.
And Keith Swenson, I'd like to introduce you. Keith is a practice leader and operating partner at Beckway that's very active in the private equity space. Keith, if you could tell us a little bit about you and your firm.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Keith Swenson. I spent much of my career in the consulting space and human resource consulting, or human capital, as we often call it today, with both Deloitte and Mercer, before moving into a role as a CHRO for a biotech company, and then pivoted to the private equity space a few years ago. And so I'm one of the operating partners with Beckway, and we specialize in the private equity space. And the thing that differentiates us as an organization is our people are former operators. And so we take kind of a very pragmatic and practical view to operations improvement, and our services range from everything from manufacturing floor to procurement to supply chain, all areas of operations improvement, and my specialty is in HR. So nice to be here. Thanks, Tim.
Great, thank you, everyone. So before we get into the the discussion with Keith and with Lisa, and they obviously they're more expert on this topic than I am for sure. I thought it would make sense to step back and explain why we are talking about this topic. Why do we think this is interesting? I've been talking to Lena and Lou about doing an article with Opus. We went back and forth on topics last year, and we were sort of struggling to find something that really resonated. And in one exchange with the two of them, I said, well, what about human capital? It's becoming more and more pressing issue at our portfolio companies. And as someone who's been working with lower middle market companies for nearly 30 years, I can say that I'm thinking about it in a totally different way. I feel like that my concept of human resources, and maybe we refer to it as human capital, has been really turned on its head. I think the traditional way that we thought about the function was as an enabler, as something that would support the business strategy, that would support the investment strategy if you were a private equity firm. And I think COVID has made it a much more pressing tactical challenge and performance challenge, and consequently, I think as well has sort of pushed it into a more strategic function within the company. And I don't think this is, my opinion is, and I think the panelists agree, that this is not entirely a COVID related impact, and it's not something that's going to go away during 2022 if hopefully COVID starts to become less of a pressing issue for business. I think this is a new world order, a new condition on the ground that all businesses need to think about differently, and private equity firms need to think about differently. We think that human capital needs to have a seat at the table when you're forming investment strategy, thinking about investment strategy, forming business strategy, executing investment in business strategy, and we think that that's something that will not only last through 2022 but beyond. And then I would throw out there as well that after the dust settles and we're done sort of licking our wounds on all the negotiations we've been doing with employees and trying to figure out what our workforce looks like, that we might be better off for this hand-to-hand combat, that we actually have not invested enough in the tools, the process, the people that drive human capital and make employees happy and productive at the workplace, and that we might at the end of this actually be in a better place and on a better trajectory. So I throw that out there as a potential silver lining to the chaos of the last 2 years. So that's enough on the backdrop, but that's why sort of we're having this conversation. And Keith, as I said, Lisa and Keith are much smarter about this than I am, so we look forward to hearing what they have to say, not me. The way we're going to do this, and we think it'll help make it a little fun. Lena's going to have a couple more polling questions for you, and we're going to do them as we go into some of the topics that we wanted to cover with the panelists. So, Lena, if you don't mind, could you please give the attendees the polling question about growth strategy and recruiting?
Sure. 1 second.
And then while you're doing that, I think I'm going to keep the discussion going, and we're going to ask Lisa to contribute first. So, Lisa, how has the recruiting environment today changed? How is it different from the recruiting environment for you pre-pandemic, which is obviously Milrose?
You're muted, Lisa.
Hi, everyone. Sorry about that. So we were all accustomed to this being a rote process. We'd place an ad, we'd scan through the resumes, we'd bring top talent in, we'd have a couple interviews, a handshake, extend an offer, straight compensation discussions, and we were done. That is behind us now. It's a distant memory. Like you mentioned earlier, Tim, the war on talent is turned on its head. It was the Great Resignation, and it's currently turning into the Great Sabbatical. And we say to ourselves, where are all our employees? Where are people? Where is everyone? We're doing everything we possibly can at this point. So I see companies re-engineering the recruitment process, and they're taking more of a marketing approach. So you have to be in this to win it. They're taking out huge billboards. I recently saw a billboard for Amazon, come work with us, and they're throwing sign-on bonuses out there. So the marketing approach is live and it's well. The advertising has changed, and also employers have to pivot to understanding what their employment value proposition is. So that could mean a lot of different things. That could mean anywhere from competitive compensation to having a stellar management team. You have to understand and offer the experiences right now that candidates truly value. And it's a little tricky because candidates and employees value many different things. So you have to find out where your niche is and go for that and put that out there and market that. So in that respect, the re-engineering piece it's not as easy as it is, but it is doable for us.
Thanks. Hey, Keith, does Lisa's experience resonate with you, or are you seeing a similar, more challenging environment and companies getting more creative and programmatic in how they think about recruitment?
Yeah, similar experiences. So as of late, the last 6 months or so, I've spent a fair amount of time in the manufacturing sector where the labor issue is extremely acute. And, of course, it's an issue in other sectors as well, transportation, technology, most of them. But in the ones that I've dealt with in manufacturing, particularly acute, for a number of reasons that we're aware of, the stimulus, Amazon coming in to compete, all that kind of stuff. But I think of recruiting, I've always thought of recruiting actually as more of a sales role, and it's never been more true than today. With the use of social media and other kind of really focused ways of building a pipeline of talent communities, that's what's had to be done in order to build and to find people. And so a couple of things that I've seen is I've had clients, and so first of all, one of the issues is, some of our clients and their owners will say, well, it's a retention problem. And that's true. It is a retention problem. I always look at recruiting and retention as kind of two sides of the same coin. But, and then they'll say, it's more than just pay. And I'll say, that's also true. But it's the pay landscape has changed as well. And so you can't ignore that and think that you can recruit, you can effectively recruit people without being at market today. And the market has changed, and it's changed very quickly. The other thing, so I've seen very creative ways of reaching out to communities. In one case, an organization reached out to a particular ethnic community. They reached out to the churches. They spent time getting to know the organization. They provided transportation. They did a number of things that they had to do to find what they found, to find a workforce of very qualified and talented people, but they had to work hard, much differently than they had done in the past. So it's a very kind of proactive approach to it. The other part of it that's, I think, equally important has been the onboarding and training. And during COVID, some organizations at least kind of lost their footing. And for reasons that we understand. And they were things like, having to focus on protocols and having to focus on remote work and all kinds of other issues that they were facing. And some of the rigor around training and onboarding kind of fell by the wayside. And I've seen organizations have to kind of reset that whole approach to bring people on. And what I call it is hovering over their people during the most vulnerable time, where they can leave for a few dollars more an hour, for example. And they have to be on top of them. They have to train them. They have to have a pulse on a daily basis with them. So it's a new world.
Thank you. Lena, do you have the results from the polling question? You want to pop them up there?
Yes, it was, let me see if I can pop it up again, but it was 75% yes, 25% no.
Okay, so that's consistent with what we expected, I think. Hey, Lisa, we talked, when we were preparing for this, we talked a little bit about some of these questions, and you mentioned how you were working and some of your colleagues were working differently with recruiting firms. It was much more hand in glove,
Yes.
maybe than it had been historically. Can you maybe flesh that out, put some color on that for the attendees?
Sure. We currently have a need for salespeople. So our CRO has gotten intimately involved in meeting the recruiters in person, inviting them into Milrose so they can get to know him. What are his expectations? Meet me, and just go through what our culture is like, explain what our challenges were. So that helped a bit, but sadly enough, the recruiters are having the same challenge in finding people. So we're trying to partner with them moving forward. We've never really dealt with as many recruiters as in the past as we are doing now. So we're going to go back into that mode now that it's the beginning of the year, and we're going to touch base with them. We're also going to recruit for a professional in-house recruiter. We think that if we have a laser focus strictly on our business, one person is dedicated to do that, that could help pick up the pace for our open positions.
Which is a great idea until you can't find in-house recruiters. Which is
I don't want to put that out there in the environment, in the atmosphere.
Maybe you should not have shared that, Lisa. But it's out, so we can't do anything about it.
My phone is blowing up now with recruiters.
So Lena, we have another polling question. It's similar to the first one. To Keith's point about it being, recruitment and retention being, two sides of the same coin. Can you put up the question, or put out the question, is your growth strategy at risk due to challenges in retaining talent? And then let's pivot to retention, because that is obviously a massive part of all of this. And Keith, you said something really interesting. You talked about how, in your experience in this current environment, retention starts the day that employee walks in the door. There's no honeymoon period where you assume the employee's gonna just sort of be careful, and make sure that they do everything right so they don't get, they have a good start to their career. It's almost as likely that they'll go in, decide they don't, the bathroom's too far away from their office, or it's a little chilly and they're not going to come back the next day. And you talked about hovering over them. Can you talk a little bit more about that in a more programmatic way, and how your clients are thinking about sort of bringing those employees in and sort of putting them on a career path, and giving them a right kind of attention, whether it's training, whether it's mentoring, management, so that from the very beginning that they are the company is on top of them and really sort of holding their hand through those early weeks when it can get pretty challenging to hold employees.
Sure. So what I've seen is that as critical to creating your pipeline of qualified candidates is reinvigorating your current supervisors and managers, and helping give them tools to be better mentors to the people, and setting the expectations for that they own this issue as well. It's not an HR issue, it's a management issue. And so a lot of times it's fundamental, it's communications, it's building out a very structured approach to what we do in the first 3 weeks. For example, one organization would bring people in, they put them on the line within a day, and I don't know what percentage, many of them, their history would walk out that day or the next day. So, and part of it had to do with just not understanding the organization. So it starts with communication from the top on a periodic basis, on a very authentic and a real basis about why are we here and what do we contribute, so people can feel a sense of value about the work that they're doing, number one. Number two, it's about helping current supervisors and managers understand how they can specifically connect with their people, and to get the pulse of them, to keep the pulse on them. And so I won't get into like every detail of it, but it's about kind of resetting your workforce as well for this new challenge, because they have to be a part of it.
I mean, the bar for traditional middle management has been raised, correct? I mean, the ability to sort of sleepwalk through the management of your team, that's long gone.
Exactly.
Lisa, I know you're having a similar experience, but maybe provide some of your unique color on how you are creating a more sort of comprehensive and attractive experience to your employees. I mean, some of it's pay, obviously, but it's not just pay. I know you've talked about other elements that are really important to keeping employees happy and increasing their longevity with Milrose. Can you describe some of that for us?
Sure. So I agree with Keith. The retention piece of retaining, an employee starts when you interview the individual, and then when you bring them through the door, their onboarding is very crucial to retaining them. So at Milrose, we have a mentor program as part of their onboarding process. And the mentor is not their boss. It's not someone within their group that they're working with. It's someone that's been with the company for a very long time from another department. They can go to that person, ask questions, understand the business. They don't have to be business related questions. So that has seemed to work for us. And it's not just pay. Now, currently, there are a lot of other asks employees need. And the pandemic has changed their life at home drastically. So they have childcare issues. So our CEO mentions continuously now that we need to learn to be flexible at the same rate of growing our business and being successful. So we're embedding the level of flexibility that we need to retain employees. And the way we do that is we open it up through conversation and communication with them. We sit down with them individually. Our goal is to try to understand what their goals are, what their needs are. And if they're reasonable, can we work with them? We're finding ourselves maybe customizing asks for employees to help them do their job at the same time and accomplish what they're asking for. So retaining talent, it has become a more expensive, and the conversations, I won't say the conversations have become difficult, the conversations have become different based on their asks. They may leave the company to go with a non-competitor simply because the other company is giving them a fully remote schedule, that's what they need to run the rest of their life. So it doesn't come down from apples to apples. Go ahead.
So Lisa, can you give some other examples of, I can imagine, pay is obviously important. Mm-hmm. I can understand how work flexibility. Are there other elements that you're seeing come up consistently with employees, other levers that you can pull to help them feel more connected and more tied to the company?
They're looking for flexible options. And the flexible options come in all different asks. Childcare, not having to come in even 2 days a week. Some of them can't do that. Right now, we're on a hybrid schedule. So based on their lifestyle at home, they can't come into the office 2 days a week. So we're learning to work with that. Medical issues, religious issues. We're in New York State, so we were mandated. We have a vaccine mandate. So that opens up a whole different area for us to have to deal with. But it's mostly flexibility, and the second thing I would say is compensation.
Is that similar to what you're seeing in terms of the sort of key drivers? One idea I had is that just from conversations that we had preparing for this, that also, Keith, career path was, important, maybe not as important to, the entry level employee, but to the next level up, the line employee, maybe who's got on more of a potentially more on a career path towards management. Are you seeing companies get more programmatic about articulating a career path and making sure that employees are being tracked against that path?
Yeah, so many companies, historically have done that. They've built career ladders, and they've done things to, in competency models that say, here's what it's going to take to get to the next level and to the next level. And some organizations have been very good at that. Others have found that they have to provide a value proposition to kind of build their employee brand. And so they now have, and so it has to do with career growth. Although people are more mobile today, so they're coming to learn some experiences, and they may stay if they see that growth is there, or they may not. I think the important thing for organizations has been to be able to understand build a broader pipeline of candidates. So the whole issue of diversity has come into play here, and whether the organization really embraces diversity, inclusion, and equity or not. And if they do, that broader appeal can get them candidates who they can bring in and who they can keep if they demonstrate that there is a career opportunity and that there is a place for them in the organization. So, it's a lot of things. It's a lot of factors around why people stay, and not the least of which is we've known forever that the intrinsic value of the job is still important to people. They want to feel like they are contributing to the enterprise. And so, again, you have to build a culture where, number one, you believe it from the top, and number two, you demonstrate that in very real ways by recognition, by promotion, by the ability for people to move around an organization and learn new skills. It's all of that.
And that's a great point. And culture is the next topic we're going to cover. But before we do that, we have a couple questions that I thought we should recognize, interesting questions. And maybe Lisa, I'll throw this to you. One of the questions is, with exit interviews, does the old adage hold, people leave their manager, not the company? And why are people leaving when they are leaving? And then I guess another question which is tied into that is, if we think about manager versus company, is what are you doing at Milrose to provide frontline managers training?
So back to your first question regarding the exit interview. Exit interviews, and I don't agree that employees leave because of their managers. I feel, based on the feedback that I've been receiving currently, employees are leaving for remote work situations and increased compensation. Their compensation in most cases they're increasing about 30%. And then the career path for them. So it's more of a flexible lifestyle as to why they've been leaving. Some employees have just up and moved, and we didn't even realize they moved when we were fully remote.
And are you doing more in terms of training managers as well?
So for 2022, we're looking at doing middle management training for our supervisors to help them better deal with these situations that we're being confronted with. Yes.
Yeah, it seems like it has to be best practice going forward, right? Okay, so let's, Keith, you pulled us into culture, which I think is a great topic to cover during this discussion. So, when you look at your client companies, how are they establishing company culture? When employees, so many employees are working from home, working remotely, how are they bridging the gap to not only get all the benefits from culture, the obvious ones of teamwork and collaboration, but also helping to make the employer relationship less transactional, because you have a more personal relationship with the team that you work with and with the company. So what are you seeing as best practice in that regard?
Well, culture often comes down to communication. And when I think of communication, I think of it, multi-directional. And so one of the things that we've had to do with organizations is, again, I always say reset. We've had to talk about, what do we know about the organization and their needs? And how do we get a pulse on them? And then from there, how do we demonstrate that we are trying to find ways to help them be more productive, help them be engaged in the organization? And so being remote, that presents its challenges. Some organizations are saying, we're going to come together it's certain times when it makes sense for us to be in the room together for whatever those reasons are. And for some of them, it's episodic. For others, it's scheduled kind of a thing. So the whole thing around people interaction has, companies have different needs and different ways of going about it. But what I think is most important is more intense communication from the leadership of the organization, whatever media you choose to do, and that communication includes listening. So you need to hear, you need to figure out how you're going to prioritize those things that you can do to keep people interested, whether it's recognition programs, whether it's ways, training and development programs and other career development. To me, it's kind of all around communications. And like you said earlier, some of this is here to stay. So companies are continually experimenting with different ways to work with this, what Lisa termed, the hybrid workforce. It's going to be different, but some of the same underlying principles are the same around engagement. It's just like you're just not in the room together all the time.
Lisa, how have you worked to form culture and a sense of sort of a company feel, even though so many of the employees are working remotely and not in the office collaborating and spending time at the water cooler together?
Yeah, well, Keith is right. We're just in a different place, but our hybrid, that's why we feel so important and strongly about the hybrid model for us. We still can collaborate with our team, and based on what Milrose does, our professional service, there is a level of collaboration. We feel that training is a lot more effective in person. We do have online training, but the hands-on approach for what we do always worked really well for us. Our employees we have loyal employees, and they help each other. So it's been a little bit, it's easier when you're next to someone, you can just turn around and ask them a question, or like you said, go to lunch or go to the water cooler. Yes, that's absolutely missing. So we've tried to increase the communication. We've hoped that our supervisors, or we know that our supervisors are doing it on a weekly basis. They do meet with their teams. Our employees know that we're reachable anytime, day or night, actually, and on any means of communication. They can always find someone on the senior management team. So from that aspect, we are there for them. So, and we try to keep the communication open.
Yeah, I mean, I know that with our firm, it is it's an ongoing challenge. We really enjoyed getting to work together more during the summer last year, and then with Omicron coming through the state of Connecticut, New York, and Connecticut, we shut down again. And I think that the communication does get harder. You have to be more rigorous about it. You have to actually create opportunities for communication, because you don't have the random, I'm walking past each other in the hallway or just stumbling into somebody's office with a question. Lisa, have you found that DEI is an important component? I know it's something we've talked about, that you're putting some emphasis on in 2022. Do you think that will be an important part of having the employees feel more comfortable with long-term employment and feel more loyal to the company? Is that something that you're viewing as one of the tools in your arsenal?
So DEI is very important moving forward for all organizations. Regarding loyalty, so we felt that in the beginning of the pandemic that we had to show our employees our loyalty to them first, and our employees have always been loyal. So we mobilized and we did everything possible to keep them safe. And at the same time, our employees, we realized that they had new worries and mental strains to contend with at the same time that they were maintaining high productivity levels for us early on in the pandemic. So to us, that spoke to the loyalty factor for us. When we speak about diversity, you can walk into our organization and it's one of the diverse organizations I ever been with. But with Milrose, we never really, you don't see anything on our website about it. We never really bragged about it. So with the new diversity, equity, and inclusion movement, we looked at what we can do better. So we found some quick fixes, some things that we were doing wrong, and we made those changes. And we hope our employees are seeing the changes that we're making moving forward to make our environment better than it was before. And we're committed to bringing in a consultant, another set of eyes in this area to say to us, maybe you can do this better, because we believe that the DEI effort in it is the sustainability of our workforce moving forward. It's all about our employees.
That's a good segue to the next and final sort of category that we wanted to cover. And Lena, would you mind putting out the final polling question? And this one, is your HR, or we'll say human capital department, more involved today in business strategy formation than it was before the pandemic? So I threw this out at the beginning, and it's somewhat hypothetical. I mean, I'm not sure. But I believe that we're sort of in this hand-to-hand combat mode today, and we're getting, as we sort of go through it, we're all getting smarter about what's working and not working. But I think as we start to pull out of that feeling of just trying to stay ahead of the problems we're having, recruiting, retaining, that we're going to have to recognize that human capital is an important and vital part of growth going forward. And just exactly what you were saying, Lisa, at the end there, that the old days when the business strategy would be formed and then you call somebody from HR and say, okay, this is our strategy. We need to recruit people who do this. We need to develop people who can do this. That is off the table and not a workable solution. And you need to be at the table as the strategy is being developed. And it needs to be right in there with all the other key elements that are going to drive thoughtful strategy and then effective execution. That's sort of my current thinking, and I think ultimately will be one of the positive outcomes of this calamity and all the challenges that we've had. I guess starting with you, Keith, do you feel that that is the new world order, that human capital is going to be at the table with business strategy and a critical partner in the strategy development and execution?
I do, and when you think about kind of the history of HR, where I've spent my career, it's evolved over time from being less transactional to becoming more strategic, but it was slow in coming, and in the middle market even slower. So the middle or the lower market even slower, and even today, HR has still been looked at as kind of a foundational tactical contributor. And while it's extremely important, it's been viewed as a support service and not a strategic differentiator. But that's kind of all changed. Just in the last year, I've seen it happen so many times that because of the criticality of the function, the labor issues, companies aren't hitting their budgets. There are lost opportunities, and they feel it. Now they're feeling it on the bottom line. Whereas before, when you thought about the cost of turnover, it was one of those kind of hard to measure, hard to get your arms around it. And so, this, like you said, is probably the silver lining to all of this, that organizations now, when they feel it in their wallets, then they are now starting to say, okay, now I get it. Now I get, we still need to be tactical in many ways. We still need to have foundational programs in place, but we need to be more strategic, because we're just like you're out competing for your customers, we're out competing for talent at the same time. And you won't be able to do that unless you have kind of the right mindset from the leadership, and for the leadership to know what to expect.
And Keith, you'll be happy to know that 100% of the attendees agree with you on that one. Everyone said that HR is at the table more now.
That's surprising.
So Lisa, what's your sort of thinking on this? As you look back over your career, do you feel like, have you also observed an evolution taking place and maybe a revolution in the last 2 years? And sort of how do you see your function interacting with the C, as part of the C-suite going forward on investment strategy and
Sure.
and business
Yeah,
strategy?
I agree with Keith. It has come fast and furious for us. The pandemic has drastically changed how companies operate day to day. So the human capital management has become front and center in the process of reinventing workflows in the digital workspace for everyone involved. And as HR professionals, we want nothing more than to have our human capital programs and practices and policies drive the overall strategy of the organization. And the only way we could really do that is to, as you say, have a seat at the table. I feel like I've been very fortunate at Milrose, because I feel like since I've gotten there, it's always been like that. I can ask whatever question I need to ask. I'm invited into all of the meetings. They ask me questions, they call constantly, and I in turn do the same thing, and I'm never turned away. So I think it's been overall a healthy disruptor for our profession. It's forced the status quo to change. So it's been a positive for me personally, and I think for the profession, I think we've really welcomed it, if we can say that anything really positive has come out of the pandemic over the last 2 years. There's change on the way, and for us, for the last 2 years, there's been change every single day in the HR arena.
And do we think that this hyper focus on human capital will effectively jumpstart a new era of sort of workplace productivity? Is that a possibility? I mean, I actually think it is a possibility that that this area has been relatively untapped. It has certainly been more tapped, as Keith pointed out, in bigger companies. Mm-hmm. But speaking for lower middle market companies, I think there are plenty of employees who, if they had been given better career path management, would 20 years ago would be more successful today in their roles, and the companies would benefit from that, in terms of creative ideas, better management, and better performance. Do you guys, do you agree that there's some possibility that we will experience that kind of outcome, similar to the outcome of applying technology as thoughtfully and aggressively as we've done for the last 20 years?
I think so, Tim. I think that this is a kind of a trigger point for figuring out how do you invest in human capital. For the most part, HR was looked at as overhead and not as a place to invest, to figure out what kind of return can you get on your investment. And so, there are many organizations out there that are working at measuring levels of productivity, levels of turnover, trying to be more predictive in terms of what does the data tell us about future operational results. And there's not been a huge investment in that, except for very large companies and very people-intense companies. But there's a lot of research out there that's been done around that I think now needs to trickle down to the rest of organizations and HR folks, and to have tools available. And again, it comes down to a leadership issue that the leadership team understands and can help set the path for where do you invest in HR and where are you going to get the return and how do you figure that out? I think it is going to be a different world.
Lisa, your thoughts?
I agree with Keith. It's definitely trending that way. We can't look back. We're not going to be able to look back. We're not going to be able to do what we did yesterday. So we need to reinvent how we're going to train. And you know, a happy employee is a more productive employee. It's as simple as that. But the employees also have to work hand in hand with their employer to help us understand what their need is, where they want to go, how we can help them be better as well.
Great. That's I think that's sort of how where I think we want to leave the conversation. Lena, are there other? I'm following the Q&A. Should we open it up now more broadly and say anyone out there who wants to ask a question? We are looking at Q&A. If you want to throw it out, we'll try to answer those questions now.
Yes, please feel free to submit any last-minute Q&A that you might have before we wrap today's webinar.
So give everyone a minute or two, but then if not, we will wrap things up.
And just for the audience's information, I did post the link to the recent article that we published. If there's interest in reading that, we would love for you to see it. But it doesn't look like we have any additional Q&A.
Yeah, only the original, those original three. So I think we're good. Thank you, Keith. Thank you, Lisa. Really appreciate your time and your thoughtful answers and the insights that you provided everyone today.
Thank you for the invite.
Thank you for participating.
Yes, thank you guys so much for the insight, for your time. Tim, thank you for leading the discussion. And to all of you for participating in that recent article. I think there's a lot of really helpful nuggets for the audience and those that are interested and very timely points, I should say. So thank you to our sponsor, David Kogan. I know that you joined us late, but I did give you a shout out. Thank you for your continued support. Tim, again, for leading the discussion, and Lisa and Keith for your time and contributions. We have a number of events coming up. Two in front of you are just two of them. We'll be in touch and keep you posted. But until then, stay safe, and we look forward to seeing you all soon.
Thanks, Lena.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks all.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye now.